And telling points in this very important debate, Madam Deputy Speaker, because this is the fourth time Parliament has been asked to hold a general election. It has been like the nation in schism, unable to do anything worthwhile whilst this dreadful problem of Brexit hangs over us. Now, I would have infinitely preferred that this Parliament had sorted the Brexit problem out and we would have left on March the 31st before we held a general election. But the fact is we haven't, and we are in this position. And we're in this position, Madam Deputy Speaker, because the coalition, under my then Right Honourable friend for Witney, passed the Fixed Term Parliament Act in 2011, to which this Act seeks to amend it. And that Act was passed in a very different time. It was passed with the purpose of making sure that the coalition couldn't end early. And I think it was passed in undue haste, without proper consideration as to what the consequences might be in a situation where there were no overall majority in Parliament. And I think one of the first things whoever gets a majority in this House after the election will want to be to revisit that Fixed-Term Parliament Act to see, in fact, whether we want to alter its provisions so that we never get in this situation again. As I say, for too long this Parliament has been paralysed. For it's been 3 years, 4 months since we held the referendum.
Seems longer.
My honourable friend for New Forest says it seems longer. I think it seems like an eternity. 80% of this House voted to trigger Article 50, and most of all Labour and Conservative members of Parliament produced a manifesto in their 2017 election in which they pledged to honour the result of that referendum, and yet this Parliament has still not resolved that matter. So I am delighted that it seems, Madam Deputy Speaker, we appear to be moving towards a situation where it is likely tonight that the House will pass this bill. The only question that remains is the opposition amendment 2 as to whether we're going to have it on the 9th or the 12th. Now, my marginal preference is for a Thursday. As many honourable members have already said in this debate, it is a very, very long tradition that we hold elections on a Thursday for a lot of very good reasons that have already been adduced. But I think what has not been said in this debate, and there's been problems about booking halls and big rooms big enough for the count, I would think most competent authorities, indeed the discussions that I've had with my local authorities, have already pre-booked these venues. So these relevant schools, the relevant halls, libraries, garages, pubs, wherever these community centres, wherever these polling stations are going to take place, will have already been warned and will have already agreed that they can hold an election sometime in December, and I would think this will be in accordance with that discussions. I take the point about Northern Ireland business need to be got through, but I would have thought that could be got through on Thursday if we're going to prorogue on Thursday. But it is vitally important that it is put through because it gives the legal authority for public funds to be drawn down in Northern Ireland. So that is a very, very important thing. We can all discuss what are the pros and cons of the 9th or the 12th, and that is an important part of this debate. I think there are some pros and cons. I think the 9th is marginally further away from Christmas. On the other hand, the 12th gives EROs, despite the fact that the venues have already been pre-booked, a little bit more time to actually get them confirmed, to get their election registration staff in place, to allow later in the week, as they say, to get them prepared, and so on and so forth. Because the election staff during the elections do a terrific job. We could not run an election without them. And I've talked to them often during these 7 elections that I've been elected to this place. And they work incredibly hard. They get there very often at 6 in the morning, and they often don't leave until well after the close the poll at 10 o'clock. And often in my constituency, and I hope no village or parish is going to take offence at this, but their village hall is often very draughty and very cold, and I've seen them there pretty cold, and I would think they could be in December in a pretty cold situation. So I hope that they will have plenty of heaters to keep them warm. So in closing, Madam Deputy Speaker, I said I would only make a short contribution. I think an election now is absolutely essential. I think we do need to resolve by a general election, through a full franchise, electing a new government, a new parliament, a new executive, who will have the authority of that general election to resolve the Brexit question once and for all. I sincerely hope that we re-elect a Conservative government with a good majority so we can get it resolved.
It's been blunt.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I will preface my remarks about the choice between Monday the 9th and Thursday the 12th. We're simply saying, thank God, that this House now appears to be resolving the issue. I say thank God as the co-chair of the All-Party Humanist Group, so I have perhaps not quite the same certainty about the deity as many honourable members and friends will have. But I actually think it is incredibly important for us, in our responsibility to all the public servants of the United Kingdom and the national interests of the United Kingdom, to resolve the problem between the legislature and the executive. And we've got to a place where ordinary public administration is now extremely difficult to effect because of the uncertainty in this place and the impossibility of the government actually carrying a coherent programme. So I say thank God advisedly. I also say thank God, Madam Deputy Speaker, because of the selection that you and your colleagues under the Chairman of Ways and Means have made for this debate, to make sure that it's properly focused on the in-scope issues of the bill, because obviously the temptation for any piece of legislation then to have attached to it any number of different issues in a parliament as incoherent as this one in terms of its makeup is self-evident. And the discipline brought to our proceedings today is also enormously welcome. I also say thank God because of that selection, I think, means that the amendment passed earlier as an amendment to the programme motion, I managed to miss that vote because I was engrossed in a conversation with the noble Baron Williams of Oystermouth about drugs policy and other issues, so engrossed in the conversation and so grateful for getting him after 4 months to be able to have a conversation with him that I literally screamed the bells out of my mind and so missed the vote. So I confess publicly my error, and having thought these things are impossible for any competent person to do, actually miss a rather important vote. I put it on the record with a due and appropriate humility for being so distracted. But again, another godly reason for being so distracted by the former Archbishop of Canterbury. However, Madam Deputy, I want to put in a word for the poor old electoral registration officers, who are going to be faced with the challenge of doing an election in pretty short order at a difficult time of year, and to ask them then not to go on the customary day of Thursday and to do it on a Monday will produce all sorts of challenges in terms of their normal availability of the polling stations and everything else that would be available on a Thursday customarily. It also, the point was very well made, I've forgotten which colleague made the point, about the necessity, I think it actually came from the other side, about the need then to engage on Sunday in order to prepare for Monday. And again, let's think to at least some degree about the burden that they are going to have to carry in preparing for all this. And then we come to the whole issue of advancing this 3 days. Now, I'm as anxious as anybody else to get our governance in the United Kingdom back on a sound footing, where there's either going to be a sound coalition arrangement if a majority is not secured. I'm confident we would win a majority at a general election, so that will obviously is part of my enthusiasm for us getting on and getting it done. However, no one can take that for granted, as we've learned from 2017, but we need an administration to form that can normally rely on a majority in this House. And so if the electorate gift us the need for another coalition, then at least we have the opportunity for the numbers to play out in a way where we can have a programme for government that is actually sustainable and done on a proper basis. And we've seen the difference where we were able to do that in 2010 to 2015, a full 5-year programme in coalition with the Liberal Democrats. And we've seen the instability given the numbers that came out in 2017 and the enormous difficulty given how important Europe is as an issue and the wrestling with conscience that we've seen from people in all parts of the House about the division between their loyalty to their belief in the European ideal, the implications for that, and also people's loyalty to party as well.
I just heard reference to the European ideal. I'd just be grateful if my honourable friend would tell me if he has had any evidence about what that ideal really means. Has he heard anybody ever properly justify why they'd want to remain in this European Union, which is utterly undemocratic and dysfunctional?
I'm extremely grateful, honourable friend. I suspect I might get into a deal of trouble if I followed him down that rabbit hole, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would love to, and I think it's actually about an attachment, if you're going to allow me just to very briefly reply to that point. It's actually about an attachment to internationalism and values that our young people can be convinced of can be carried out on a global scale, as well as this is not if global Britain is to mean anything, then it means the values that motivate people with the European ideal about cooperation with fellow neighbouring states. Britain is big enough to do this on a global scale and to make our young people proud of their country, proud of its international, proud of its attachment to the rule of law, proud of its attachment to the defence of human rights, and that vision is holding is now tantalisingly close to be able to scope a new vision for Britain, and that's why one of the reasons why it's terribly important to get on with this election. I can wait to my honourable friend.
Trying to remember who it was who had made the intervention. It was my honourable friend, the member for Central Suffolk and South Ipswich, I think it is, who made the intervention. It wasn't the honourable gentleman opposite who made the point about the Sunday and therefore the potential difficulties to the Monday. Perhaps that will help his memory and help take him back to the date and the important point of the clause.
Nice to my honourable and learned friend. But for electoral registration officers, being faced with an election in short order, these 3 days are actually going to be extremely important to them and their team. In exactly the same way as it's important to us for the sound discharge of our business here, and I heard the statement being the business of the House statement yesterday by the leader, where he pointed out the importance of actually getting a Northern Ireland budget bill passed before we dissolve. And there is a Northern Ireland interest where there is obviously there is this central divide about the Brexit agreement that the Prime Minister has secured, about its role in upholding the Good Friday Agreement, and of course the tensions that has then arisen in Northern Ireland about the treatment in Northern Ireland of this. And of course that is going to be a proper subject of discussion in the general election, in particular in Northern Ireland.